Tumbleweed Joe made an interesting comment, and I said that when there's a metaphysics, there can only be one. All the competition and evolution of metaphysics, not just between them, but in a particular idea of metaphysics, we improve our definitions. Like what plus or equals means in mathematics. And we have alternate mathematics. We also change them within a given mathematics. Everybody that believes in one perspective, or most of the people or some of the people end up agreeing on, well, that perspective needs to be updated, and that's not supposed to happen in metaphysics. He says, well, what if I said this about science, that it's only supposed to be one truth? This makes me think, I should change my way of just telling people what the situation is and let them go their way into a more educational way, because you just don't understand. See, when someone follows this logic of metaphysics, you can think of a lot of things, and it cleans out a lot of garbage, a lot of drama. And so it's very useful. You go into this clean room and you can fall in love with it and think that it's the only way to do proper, cleanliness and stuff. Really, you just need to learn some of the principles at play there. Because you'll find, like a Ptolemaic system, you'll modify the basic ideas with all this wiggle room and fudge factors, and you just need a new, like the Keplerian system, a new frame of reference, and make stuff clear. Now, if you think of metaphysics like you think of science, where there's all this competition of what the first theories, and they're theories, then it's not metaphysics. The reason they call it metaphysics, and we've been debating this for thousands of years, is because it's distinct from that, you see. It's distinct from the scientific idea. They're not theories, they're axioms that are automatically true. They're not merely assumed to be true for the purposes of a particular deduction. They are true automatically. That's what I'm saying doesn't exist. I'm saying the only truths happen after you say, okay, here's a proposition. Assume that's true. Assume these other ones are true. What follows? And you do a deduction, some sort of derivation, some sort of logical processing. And then you have something that acts like a metaphysics, but it's just an arbitrary assumption. Now, how arbitrary, and arbitrary with respect to what? That's something you go and test. Is this assumption sound that, the gravity is a particular value? If you test it over and over, there's various techniques, but one is just test it over and over, it comes out the same all the time. So then that's a reliable assumption. And it's arbitrary in the sense that you just choose and posit it. It's not arbitrary in the sense that you don't have a reason, right? You can't come up with some sort of reason. But there's other alternate reasons, and you could have funneled any kinds of reasons into a different conclusion based on your goal and how you reason and everything else. Okay, so if metaphysics is these, there is an area of studying what assumptions you start an argument with. What assumptions do you start an argument with? Which kind of assumptions? They used to start it with God is good, is always one in there. Now we're very careful maybe about which principles we're starting from, or we're supposed to be. It's an interesting field of study, a subfield of logic in general, And I do call that ontology. But I don't believe in metaphysical ontology, the capital O ontology idea as a field of philosophy of metaphysics. No, it's just a study of what principal assumptions, what pieces, what are the atomic bits that you allow into your particular field of discussion when you bring some terms in and not others in some work of communication or thought. So it exists there. You don't have to give that up. But if you see it evolving the way scientific theories do, then we don't have an argument. Because I'm saying it's all the scientific way, that there is no metaphysical way. You see, and this happens a lot with people who argue, no, there is objective involved, because they just think that they have to believe that in order to think about the principles they want to think about. But I'm just saying the law of cause and effect is a theory. It's a theory of cause and effect. And it captures a part of the phenomena because the part it names, and it doesn't quite understand other parts of it yet. And we're working on it. It's a theory, a really good, old, advanced theory, but actually we've recently found out it has some serious upgrading to do. We might need even to get rid of it. The theory of cause and effect might need to be replaced with theories of supersymmetry and conservation of energy. I mean, I could live with that. That's how it works with theories. You start this off telling me to be educated. You need to study at the basis why some principles are called metaphysics. Because the whole point is to avoid having to answer to the scientific process. If you're willing to have metaphysics answer to the scientific process, we only have a semantic discussion going on, because that's all that's important to me. Metaphysics, like any principle or theory, are theories, right? And they can be addressed by empirical, scientific work, right? If you agree with that, then the rest is just semantic. You want to call it metaphysics, fine, but don't come to me telling me I need to be educated when you're misusing the term. Metaphysics means what I'm talking about, okay? This is very well studied. I was forced to study it. I've studied it 20 years since then. Metaphysics is about what I'm talking about. If it's metaphysics, no, it's not all this interchange of like science. And granted, you probably think, well, no, it's not an interchange because it's just purely logical. But when people make logical arguments and then they think about something, I'm sorry, that's material. First of all, I have it's always material card because it's your material brain doing material things to material information. Boom, it's material. Okay, but also it's material because when things you're doing logic, you're like, but this argument, but maybe I can try this. All the creativity and options you have, those are informed by your experiences in the real world. Even your current diet and what your current metabolism state is very material. These ideas and logical advances. And if you're just making up words that go together grammatically and spewing them out there and seeing if it's deniable because, hey, I just created words that look undeniable, you're not very good at it. I mean, that's not what people that discuss this stuff do. They use evidence. They say, but this in this situation, and it applies better in this situation. And always, if you track the application sound, it's going to come back to the real world. That's all we live in. It can't come down to anything else, and you're seeking these truisms, but they're complicated truisms. The law of identity needs a kind of philosophical research that is informed, like the scientific method. It's not what we consider science because that's a particular part of natural philosophy, but it is a kind of natural philosophy and can be empirical. The law of identity even. Whether we should have time automatically involved, because there's no statement of time in that kind of mathematics. The law of cause and effects, these are scientific theories. They need to be studied scientifically, including by natural philosophers that aren't scientists but are subject to empirical evidence and use the knowledge of science as well as an empirical method. Not just an empirical method, but a method that has to make arguments from materiality. There has to be evidence in the material world to start the argument in natural philosophy. And those should be discussed, but there are other truisms like, oh, everything's material. Yeah, it comes from the definitions. We exist. Material is the stuff that is something that's more substantial. The more material it is, the more it matters, the more it impacts, the more consistent it is, so that a real horse that I'm in a field with is more real than a unicorn that I think I see in a field. And we have all of these relationships, and at no room is there anything that can't be material. It all follows from the definition of everything to begin with. But those kinds of truisms aren't what you want, just like you don't want DNA to be the principle. Why? Okay, DNAs are our absolute first principles. That's what we start with. Whatever is encoded in there, whatever's written in there, we can't read it directly, but some parts of it ourselves can. Whatever's in there, that's what we start from. But see, that's not a metaphysical thing either. It's very physical, what's in the DNA, and there's all different kinds of DNA. See, so that's why the first principles break down in it and are not metaphysical. But it's just how to explain this any differently. It's like it seems to me you can't step out of what you see to understand what I'm saying long enough. You get parts of it like the state, like the atom that is getting photons, but you don't understand that this separates the causes from the effects in a way that we've had trouble dealing with for thousands of years. Whereas if you're just doing data processing and the mind is a computer, it's straightforward. We've solved it in computer science, so take your pick.